Welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live streaming interview series, where leading new thought teachers, speakers, and authors share the intimate stories behind the 10 best spiritual books that inspired them the most on their spiritual journey. From well-known classics to hidden gems you might never have heard of, the No BS Spiritual Book Club saves you time and money by sharing reliable recommendations from those who've walked the path before you. The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only No BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello and welcome. Now, if I tell you that today's guest describes herself as a lemon-loving mad scientist, you'd likely be thinking, okay, but don't let that label fool you. She's much more than that. Liz Larson is a constant seeker who's relentlessly bent on pushing the boundaries in consciousness, awareness, self-development, and healing. A thought leader in the realm of personal development and wellness, and a master certified NLP practitioner, Liz Larson is the co-creator of the Cognomovement System, where her role as idea generator is pivotal in introducing breakthrough techniques in reshaping the nervous system, rewiring the brain and body, and resolving a wide array of issues, blocks, and unwanted patterns. She's also the author of 2 ebooks, Suffering is Optional, and the tiny book of Big Manifesting. Liz Larson joins me now to share the 10 spiritual books that had the biggest influence on her life journey, and also give us some insight into the pioneering modalities that are blending esoteric and spiritual studies with scientific pragmatism to radically transform the functioning of the brain, mind, body, and spirit. Liz, welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Well, lemon-loving mad scientist indeed. I think you may have just won the award for the most original, intriguing, and creative self-description yet.
That's funny. And also, you have no idea how much it suits me.
How many lemons a day do you suck?
Well, it's not about sucking lemons, but my family is Sicilian. There's, lemons are a part of our heritage and everything we make. And so, I'll have a lemon in everything I can, like even in a juice in the morning or a smoothie, I'll make sure there's lemon in that. So I love lemons. I like the image of lemons. I like to paint lemons. I just like them. And the mad scientist part is actually a little more serious. It is what drives me in my work. My constant question is, what else is possible? If this is possible and I combine it with that, does it create something new on the planet? So I'll try anything. I'll always continue to try. And I think that's the mad part of the science, even though I believe that's what science is continuing to push the boundaries and try.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm right there with you. Yeah. What if? Yeah. Now, you say that to get to the point in your life where you could be one of the co-creators of the Cognomovement System, you had to deconstruct and reconstruct both your religious and your worldviews. Why was that?
Well, I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. So if anyone's familiar with that, it is a church that really has no ceremony in any way, shape, or form. There's no mysticism at all. And you study. So I'm very well versed in the Bible and biblical literature. But your religion, if your family's steeped in it, is your worldview. It's what you think your life and the world is about. And as a child, I knew some of their beliefs were not accurate, at least for me. They have no belief in the afterlife. And I was seeing people's dead people. So there was that. And so I always knew that it wasn't accurate in terms of, what the cosmos was really about. So there came a point in my life where I had to completely abandon that. And I got to have this amazing experience of having that happen overnight and then rebuild after that. So yeah, why it's important, I think, to me is I'm very careful not to get caught into any one belief system. It really allows me even more of that. What else is possible? What's next? My mind is completely free of the constraints of religious and spiritual beliefs as most people have them. So
you also say that each of the hundreds of books that you read and listened to helped you. So if you've read and listened to hundreds of books, I imagine that picking just 10 must have been a challenging task.
Wow, it was so fascinating and so much harder than I thought. And it reminded me of this thing that I learned in NLP training. It was called a timeline treasure map.
Yeah.
And you went through the timeline of your life and were able to see the places where people helped you. I absolutely hated that process and got the most out of it. I love it now. But going through the books was like that for me. It reminded me of the eras that I went through. And those are the books I ended up picking. Was the book that sent me in a whole new direction, in a whole new era of my learning. And I don't want to call it education. It's really growth.
Yes. Yeah. And that's exactly what we want. We want those books that really did shift the perceptions and moved you to a different place. Yeah. They're the ones that's worth reading.
Yeah. And for me, I realized as I was looking and through all the books that so often I'll read 4 or 5 books at a time, which sounds chaotic, but it's the way my mind works.
Yeah.
Those 4 or 5 books will often be shown sort of to me. They show up in my life or someone will hand them to me. And as I read them, my mind extrapolates pieces from them. And what I construct is something completely new. So often I'll be talking to somebody about a book that I read. And in talking about it, I realized that they didn't get the same thing out of it that I did. And a lot of it's because of that. I'll be reading multiple things at one time and constructing something new. So,
yeah. So the first book and the second book, I think it's certainly one of your books is a children's book. It's The Children of Green No, the first book in the Green No Chronicles by L.M. Boston, published in 1954. What was it in that book that inspired you?
Ooh, that's the feeling. That's the stuff. So I live in a small town and we were bused to our local library and we could pick our very own book. And this book just talked to me. And in my mind, it was about ghosts. So it was contraband for me in my house.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I mean, I was certain I would get caught reading that book and somebody would know the truth about me. I don't know how many times I read it as a kid. And so I listened to it on Audible again before this interview. And it's really about possibility and about things in another realm, in another dimension. It's really not even so much about ghosts as I look at it now as an adult, but it gave me that sensation of real wonder about what else is out there that I need to know about. So I know it's a children's book, but it started me out at about 8 years old.
Sometimes those forbidden books are the ones that move us the most.
Yeah. And it's funny, now that I think about it, my parents would absolutely not have cared if I read that book. They wouldn't even have realized why it was important to me. So it's kind of funny what a kid thinks.
Yeah. So number 2, Ask and It Is Given, Learning to Manifest Your Desires by Esther Hicks and Jerry Hicks, published in 2004.
Yeah, this one is so funny too. It was another one that absolutely felt like contraband because it's about guides and channeling, which to me was just completely sort of outside the realm of anything that would have been okay to know about. And the truth is, it was a little scary to me because I still wasn't sure, was that an okay thing to be listening to or reading. Or so that book I saw at Costco, and I walked by it and kind of side-eyed it. Finally picked it up and read it, and wow, I mean, it was such an amazing idea about really having conversation with the universe. That's what it meant to me. And that it really opened up the idea that there was this ability to change your universe, your reality, through your own self, through your own body, without literally asking to a god or your priest or whoever, right? It was very confirming, I think, in that way for me.
You know, it's interesting looking at your list of books. I'm trying to pinpoint which one was the pivotal one that really switched you out of the mindset that you had been trained in.
You know, it was actually not a book. It was a hypnobirthing. When I was pregnant with my child, my second child. I have two kids. They're 11 years apart, and wanted to do a natural home birth. And I was introduced to hypnobirthing, which was guided meditation. And in a guided meditation, I asked a question and literally spent the night being shown how to deconstruct that belief system and how to start constructing another. It changed my nervous system. That's a big part of why I do what I do today. It changed the way my human body processed this kind of information. And so that's really what it was. Some of the books, you know, ahead of that, like probably Ask and It Is Given, had started to create some foundation, some more crumble.
Yes.
To get to that point, though.
Yeah. Well, book number 3 is certainly a book that would crumble a lot of foundations. The Field, The Quest for the Secret Force of the Universe by Lynn McTaggart, published in 2003.
Yeah. To me, the idea of that connectedness, the connectedness of everything, and what really is changing. When we ask for something like Ask and It Is Given, who are you asking? What are you asking? And where does it come from? The Field for me sort of scientifically solidified the where and the what and the how. And so today, a lot of our work is explained and understood by understanding not only our own field of potential, the field around the body, but the greater field that it connects to. And Rupert Sheldrake for me was another one that really helped me understand that piece so much more. Fascinating.
You know, The Field was a really, important book for me. I mean, it didn't change me on my path, but it did give me an awful lot of answers. And it's interesting that of all the things that Lynn McTaggart has done, and she's done much to educate the public on issues that the mainstream don't really want us to know about.
Yeah.
The Wikipedia page focuses solely on the criticism she's received from various physicians and scientists about her magazine, What Doctors Don't Tell You. I mean, that's so unfair.
It is. It really, really is.
Yeah. Book 4, and I haven't checked out his page, but I bet the same thing happens there, is The Biology of Belief, Unleashing the Power of Consciousness, Matter and Miracles by Bruce Lipton, which was published in 2005.
Yeah. This, for me, was the whole idea of epigenetics and that the body is not static. This is something I suspected, I think I knew, but had no basis for. That so many of the things that we are told about ourselves, about our bodies, the way they work, about who we are as people and how we can change or not change, was really, I think, exposed in that book for me, that none of that's true, that everything is changeable and that our genetics are changeable.
Yes.
So I think it was that book too that kind of reaffirmed the idea that we also are an accumulation of all the genetics of those who have come before us. And Taylor Caldwell, she's an old novelist who wrote about the most amazing things. she didn't believe in past lives. People thought that the reason she could write the book she did is because she'd had past lives. But she said, no, I think it's genetic memory. And I think in the biology of belief, if I'm remembering correctly, that I think that idea was reaffirmed. I think there is both past lives and genetic memory. But I think we can call on that genetic memory and utilize it and reactivate it, but also deactivate it as well. And so in my thinking about the way we do cognomovement, those books, are very, very foundational, I think.
Did you read that book before you trained with NLP or after?
I think before. I think long before, actually.
It's interesting because, one is changing our mind, changing patterning, changing, those neural pathways, etc. The other one is how we can change, our cells, our body, and the two go together.
I think they're the same thing, actually. So see where my mind puts things together. In our work in Cognomovement, they really are the same thing. One and the other go hand in hand.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that more a bit later. Book number 5. This is a book that shows up. Actually, it's 2 books you've chosen here. They both show up many times on this show. Journey of Souls, Case Studies of Life Between Lives, published in 1994, and Destiny of Souls, New Case Studies of Life Between Lives by Michael Newton. The second one was published in 2000.
Yeah. So my friend handed me this book, and this was not long after I was introduced to Abraham Hicks. And this book came right after that big awakening that I told you about, the whole night deconstructing. I had a very specific question. My question was this: how is it right or fair that if you get one lifetime, as you do, and the witnesses, Jehovah's Witnesses say you get one lifetime, you weren't here before, you weren't here after. One lifetime, you come to the planet and you're judged on whatever happens to you. And so I happened to know a 2-week-old that had had something horrific done to them. And I knew that child would grow up scarred from that thing their whole life. And I thought, how is it fair that they'll be judged on what they do, their actions, but they've unfairly had this thing happen at 2 weeks old. So when ask and it is given, right? So Journey of Souls or Destiny of Souls was handed to me, and it answered those questions. But for me, it's never about true or not true, real or not real. It's about, does the book open and expand a new window of discovery for me, or, wondering or thinking, or does it create a little scaffolding that I can utilize? So that's the way I looked at it. And it really answered that question for me, and allowed me to reconstruct my worldview after that. So.
Book number 6 is The Dynamic Laws of Prosperity by Catherine Ponder, and that was published in 1962.
Yeah. We have Powell's Books in Portland. I'm 4 hours from there, but it's Powell's City of Books. And it literally has out of print, first print, new, used. It is a miracle of a place. And they had these books, these Catherine Ponder books that were new. They'd never been used, but all the pages were yellow. And when you opened it, all the pages fell out, right? But Catherine Ponder's books, she had a way of kind of interpreting Bible text in a whole new way, and opening the idea that some of these meanings that we think we know actually are more about prosperity, more about how to create for yourself and how to create on this planet and in this world. And so for that, I loved those books. They were a big educational piece for a little while for me.
Yeah, I looked her up, and apparently that the dynamic laws of prosperity began when members of her congregation started asking for lectures on ways to survive one of the most severe business recessions in America since World War II. And it worked so well for them that she decided to turn it into a book.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are many books, and they're amazing. If you ever get a chance, they're really fun to read.
Well, we're going to take a short break now. You're listening to a No BS Spiritual Book Club interview, and sharing the books that had the biggest influence on her life journey is pioneering co-creator of the Cognomovement System. She's also a master certified neuro-linguistic programming practitioner and author. Liz Larson will be back with more from her 10 best list after this break.
Times TV.
Maya Angelou once said that there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and when I'm not hosting Times Media's flagship radio show What Is Going On and the No BS Spiritual Book Club, I help people share their untold stories. Books are my life, my joy and my passion, and there is no greater reward than helping aspiring writers get their books out of their heads and into the hands of those who are waiting to read them. If you feel that you have a book in you but don't know where to begin, visit Sedgbeer.com. Click on the Work With Me tab and find out how my experience helping others tell their stories might be just what you've been looking for. That's Sedgbeer.com, SEDGBEER.com.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Everything that we do, we can do in a contemplative manner. Through the art of contemplation, you can use the gene keys in a really powerful way. Gene keys is basically the code book of life. In the gene keys, the book is made up of these three levels: shadows, gifts, and siddhis. And the journey is through those three levels, kind of unpicking of the shadow states, the releasing of the gifts, and then the embodying of this higher consciousness called the siddhi. And the siddhis are very exalted words. And it's not like we kind of suddenly are all these exalted Christ-like beings, but we have flashes and illuminations along the journey. And the more we get stuck into the journey, the more illumination comes to us, because the more we're releasing the light from in these codes inside our DNA. So all those revelations are inside us. So the contemplative way is the inner way.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Liz Larson, Book 7, The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Scovel Shinn, published in 1925. And this one is way near the top of the list of most recommended books.
Yeah, I found her after Catherine Ponder at the same place at Powell's Books. And probably for the same reasons as everyone else, just these foundational ideas about the state to put yourself in to create something new in your life, to actually really create change. Something I loved about Florence Scovel Shinn's stories was about how she would say she would speak something speak the words of something. I'm not saying that exactly right, but someone would ask her to basically speak into reality what they wanted, and she would, and then the thing would happen. And I found that so fascinating and always wondered about her as a human and the kind of presence that she must have had to be so certain, so sure that speaking the words would create the change. So
yeah, it's like, how did she know that? What happened to reveal that to her?
yeah, so interesting. I don't remember hearing that exactly. Did she say it? Do you know?
No, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. The truth is I've never looked that into her history. I'm not sure. I just know that she did have that presence. And I understand now that it's a neurological state of being so certain. We call it a physiological certainty.
Yes.
And being able to say this will be what happens, and then it does. It seemed like the reality just formed itself to her idea. So I loved that about her.
Yeah, and I've experienced that, and I tell people that, it's that knowing, absolute knowing in every fiber of your being that it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it does.
Absolutely. It has to come down into that, almost your root chakra, the 3D, out of the ethers and into a 3D reality. And what that feels like is the important part. It feels like, oh, clearly that will be the case.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's what she could do for other people. It's amazing.
So book number 8 is When God Had a Wife, The Fall and Rise of the Sacred Feminine in the Judeo-Christian Tradition, by Lynn Picknett and Clive Prince, published in 2019. A little bit of a change here.
Yes and no. It all seems to be in the same vein for me as I think about it. But it brought to me, and it's really an explosive book for someone to read it who hasn't gone through the kind of change worldview that I have. But what it showed me is another possibility. Again, true or not true, real or not real, I don't know. But it created for me an alternate idea of what our current reality is. The things that we hold true, according to that book, and it's very, very well researched and put together academically. They'll tell you when it's their opinion and when it's something that actually is evidence, scientific as evidence. But it showed me that the things that we believe that we've built our lives around are possibly completely untrue, which I love, because then I get to create my own.
Yes.
I could collapse even more of those ideas that I may have been secretly holding on to and realizing, oh, heck, that might be all 5,000-year-old fake news. If so, what do I do with that information? I create something new. So I loved that book.
Yeah, it's a really interesting book. I mean, it reveals the tradition of goddess worship in early Judaism, how Jesus attempted to restore the feminine side of the faith, and so much more. I mean, that's a really fascinating, kind of deep dive book that really is going to shift people's perceptions.
I think it's one that you can read and fight with it if you want to, or you can read and just be fascinated about the actual historical pieces about how we got to where we are today in our society. That part was really fascinating for me too.
Yeah. It's interesting how we think just because, a book might be old, it's telling the truth. And we all know that, most books are written by the victors of certain circumstances. So it's always going to be a subjective viewpoint.
Yeah. And if you no longer have faith where you have to understand it, you have to accept it based on faith. If you no longer have that piece, you can look at it objectively and see how people actually evolved. One of my favorite books was a textbook from college that was art history. And it showed how their architecture mirrored what was actually happening in their lives. And you could see who they were through their art. And there's something about this book that reminds me of that. The way things were happening and changing politically and, with the planet and weather-wise shaped what they believed and who they became and why they had the opinions they had. not necessarily because it came from God. So I just loved that aspect.
Book number 9, Soul Coaching, 28 Days to Discover Your Authentic Self by Denise Lynn, published in 2003.
Denise Lynn, to me, was one of the first teachers that I allowed myself to maybe follow a little bit and learn from. And I went to some of her seminars early on, and the sweetness of this human, she has such grace and such sweetness and such kindness that she showed me that in this genre, spiritual education, personal growth and development, that there can be this just sweet lovingness, not a polarized opinion, not a judgmental sharpness, which you do find in this industry. So as a human, I loved her and I loved what she wrote. But soul coaching introduced me to another area of maybe a regression work, and that the past could be changed. And then that changing that past would change the future. So that has played an integral role in the work that we do today. That idea was installed and I think kind of solidified by Denise.
And book number 10, again, another classic that turns up time and time and time again. I wonder, well, she obviously does know how many people's lives she touched, because she could tell by the sales figures of the books. But, you know, Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life, published in 1984 and still going very, very strong.
People still refer to that book all the time, but I'll tell you what really, Louise Hay is my personal hero. The idea that she published that book on the church's copier and then started making phone calls and shipped it out from, oh my God, I love that about this book. I love that it was initiative and just an idea that she had, and the bravery and courage that it took to just start putting it out in the world. And Louise Hay was an older woman by that time, you know, especially for her age range, you know, for her era. And she created an empire from that one moment in time, from her ideas and her surety that she could change the world. So that book for me is more than the great information that's in it. Of course, those ideas are classic. It's about the movement that it created.
Yeah, what it stands for.
Yeah.
Well, that's your 10 best list. Now let's talk about you and, you know, how these books, obviously, they've all had a major influence on your life, and they've all led you down various paths to the point where you are at today. But your journey into the brain's capabilities was spurred by your parents' brain illness diagnosis. Tell us a bit about that before we talk about Cognomovement.
Yeah. So, like I said, changing things had always been a fascination for me. And I owned car dealerships at one point. But even in that car dealership, I would clear the blocks, the neurological blocks to the sales process for my practitioners, for my salespeople. So I had these inklings already. It was already coming. And a lot of the things I'd studied already were getting me ready for this point. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, my parents came down with, I guess you'd call it that, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's at the same time. They were very, very healthy people, had none of the markers, not one for either of these brain disorders. But what they did have was 3 or 4 major life traumas all at once. And I watched their nervous systems do what they did in life. My mom was afraid. There was an alligator around every corner. My dad would just retreat and go to sleep. So his body handled stress by retreating into Alzheimer's, and hers went into the fear of Parkinson's. So when I began NLP training in Seattle, I had to drive 7 hours back and forth. I would literally read or listen to on Audible everything I could about how the brain could be changed. I learned about neurology, neuroplasticity, the ways the body could change the brain, how it could be changed through supplements and all of that. So for 2 years, I was constantly studying and really creating the foundation for what I know today that helped us build Cognomovement.
So, talking about Cognomovement, I have something here, which is this.
Cogno ball. Yeah.
A Cogno ball. How is this ball going to change my brain?
So the ball is really just a tool. However, I have a different version of it here. The brain likes, on the left brain, likes color and complex geometric symbol. These are chakra symbols, but they're very complex geometric symbol. And the left brain immediately goes, hey, is that for me? And the right brain loves the 3D and the kinesthetic touch. So immediately when someone is handling this ball, the left and right brain starts to be in a little more harmony, starts to talk to each other. Most of us hang out in one side of the brain or the other predominantly, and we don't have access to the rest, just out of habit and concussions and other things. So this ball, the first thing it does is that. The next thing it does is we use a lot of the color to test the brain, to see how the brain is functioning. And of course, we use it to keep the eyes focused on something. So
what's the difference between your ball and mine?
This is actually a prototype ball. We have some little ones. The difference is weight. For children and elderly people, these are easier. When we're using predominantly color, this is a little easier to see. That one is, we just have a lot of techniques. Cognomovement is like a toolbox full of hundreds of tools. And so we use the balls just a little bit differently for the different techniques. That's all.
So how did it come about? I mean, I understand NLP. I trained myself in it. I know, the background to that. How did that lead to Cognomovement?
Well, so the NLP that I took, and NLP is so many things. Again, it's like a toolbox.
Yeah.
And my trainer, her name was Linda Gale Campbell out of Seattle, and she was focused on brain remapping, which just happened to be lucky for me because that's what I needed. No coincidences, right? So I learned that the body and brain could change each other through NLP, and I learned some techniques for how that could happen. But one of the big things was the eye accessing cues in NLP, knowing that the brain utilizes the eyes to actually get to files in the brain. That's something in Cognomovement we have expanded enormously. The information that we know from the eye movement, how the eyes behave, how they track, whether or not there's nystagmus, which is jiggling of the eyes, or the eyes moving independently, things like that. So from NLP, I took that piece. We also use auditory, visual, and kinesthetic stimulus, immediately getting that part of the learning centers of the brain and body interested. So it's layers and layers and layers of things that all spur the nervous system to autocorrect itself. That's our main goal, for the system to see where it's not functioning well and correct. And so, there's some language tools of NLP that we use, but it's kind of like that scaffolding I'm talking about provided that for us when we were starting.
So how did it come about? I mean, you've got this knowledge of NLP. You're clearly somebody who's filled with ideas and wanting to, put them into practice. I mean, who actually said, hey, let's start this thing called Cognomovement?
So Bill and I met because, it's a long story, but I was doing a healing circle with a friend. We saw him that it'd be nice for him to come and maybe speak in a group in Ashland. And I contacted him and he said, sure. I said, well, give me your email, your website and all of that. I'll promote it. And he didn't have any of those things. No, nothing. So we kind of started building that stuff around a seminar that we put on together. And we started talking almost every day. Bill lives in San Diego. I live in Southern Oregon. We don't have a reason to know each other. I was working as an NLP practitioner at the time, seeing clients and doing that work. And Bill one day decided to have his wife sew a ball that looked very similar to this cloth ball. And he'd learned something about how the left and right brain worked. And so he had this idea that if he was helping people heal in a Catholic retreat center, actually, and the ladies would come in with pain, he could help them with energy medicine to heal the pain, but they'd come back with it the next weeks. So he had this idea that if he could change the brain around the discomfort, he could make a change. So he just started having people move left and right as an EMDR and say a color and focus on the pain. And he was having really amazing results. So he calls me, says, hey, I got this thing going. I know it works, but I don't know why. I said, oh, that's a brain remap. Auditory, visual, kinesthetic. I broke the whole thing down because I had that information. So that was it. That was the beginning. We started trying things on. At first, one round of this would be 15 minutes. And I'm like, Bill, sorry, but I don't have that kind of time in my life. So let me add on, moving from the low to the high. Let me move through the kinesthetic body into neutrality and then into ideas and inspiration. Let's see if we can pull the body through its own natural systems and create change around a feeling. Got it down to from 15 minutes to 45 seconds. And then on to the next thing. So how Bill and I worked from the beginning is I would add that to the pot. He would go and try it on, see how it worked, and he might come back with an add-on to that one. And back and forth we go. So that's how it was created. And it's still created that way today. New developments in Cognomovement arrive daily from ourselves or from our practitioners. So.
Tell me what would happen for somebody who was blind or had problems with their eyes that they didn't move together. I mean, could this still work for them?
Yes. So if their eyes are not working together, a lot of times we can get them working together because now we have a kind of an unprecedented understanding about how to induce the body to create these changes. So a lot of times we can get those vision problems corrected because they really have more to do with your muscles and your brain than your eyeballs. So super interesting. But if a person is blind, we actually still have them use the muscles of moving their eyes, but we touch their body. So we just use a kinesthetic input instead of the visual input. And we have amazing results with that too. That's actually a new addition. I worked with a girl with cerebral palsy who was mostly blind and had to adapt. So that's what we do.
So I read something on your site about you also explore the essence of enlightenment and the ways to achieve it. How can Cognomovement help there?
Okay, so this is where that Lynn McTaggart in the field comes in. Here's what we know. We know that every thought and feeling creates a pattern, an electrical pattern, electrical, hormonal, and chemical. And it moves from the brain to the body, the brain to the body, the brain to the body, back and forth, informing each other. We're afraid of that. Yep, we're afraid of it. Do this. Send the signal back. Be more afraid of that, right? So that creates an electrical field. And that goes into our field of potential. There's the field around the body. And then it matches with whatever comes up in life, whatever meets the vibration. As Lynn McTaggart might say, you're connecting right in with that field. And so those also have a cost in energy in the body of your vital force. And it can be measured in joules, electricity. When a heavy one, like shame or guilt or fear, is collapsed in your body, one of those patterns, all of a sudden the voltage in your body raises. It's measurable. The field around you changes and clears, also measurable now by science. And what happens is your quality of life bumps up. And as it does, you see the life equal that level of change. We use the Hawkins scale as kind of a measure. Above 250 or neutrality that I was talking about, that neutrality you can get in a certain eye position, when your body's really neutral, meaning the pattern is collapsed entirely. Above that, you have that gateway into things like acceptance, forgiveness, love, joy, bliss, and enlightenment. So we have an event called the Cogno Conscious event, and we do all these levels over 5 days now. And on the last day, everything feels so clear that you really feel what it feels like to be enlightened. And here's the big secret. It doesn't feel anything like you would imagine. There's no lightning and rainbows and unicorns. You literally look around and go, oh, that's what this is about? Everything goes still. It's amazing. The thing is, most of the people doing this work, we don't really belong there all the time because we still have work to do here in helping change the consciousness of the planet. So you have access to it once you've gone through that process. You know what that feeling is. You can jump there, in your meditations or whatever you want. But then you settle back down somewhere lower where you can reach the audience that you are responsible for teaching. So, yeah.
So if somebody says, hey, I really want to accelerate my personal growth, my ability to have, other experiences that I'm not having right now, Cognomovement could help that?
Absolutely. We have people literally change reality and timelines. And I know that sounds like woo-woo and crazy, but it's actually it's our natural world. So in the moment when I'm in, let's say, shame or blame or guilt, fear, anger, any of those heavy emotions, I can only see the world through that dominant emotion. Everything's going to look like anger or fear or blame, whatever that is. You're going to feel and see and attract everything like that. So the world looks like this. As soon as that neural pattern or just the feeling in the body is gone, our emotions are just a feeling, a chemical pattern. That's all they are. And they make the brain think they're real. Once they're gone, collapsed with Cognomovement, we just show the body the pattern and show it a new way to run that pattern. The world looks like a completely different place, completely different, instantly. So let's say you're having a problem with your spouse. You do the work around them, the anger, the fear, whatever. You go home and they are all of a sudden acting completely different. These signals from our bodies, they're interacting with each other all the time, interacting with the greater field, bouncing around. I always say that a house, like the people who live in it, you're living in each other's emotional stew. You're literally impacting each other's field all the time. And if I've got anger and you've got anger and they're a match, guess what that relationship looks like? But when one body drops it, it's like, a tug of war. If you ever played tug of war when you were kids and then you all agreed to let go at the same time, It's exactly what happens. And everything looks completely different. And people have manifested the most outrageous things, simply collapsing the feeling in the body that is, basically the antithesis of that.
So if I came to you and said, look, there's this thing that's going on and I can't get to the bottom of it, but I want it to change, maybe it's a pattern or a behavior or something that, my body's doing that, I'm not consciously aware of. What would happen if I came to you and said, I need that to change? What would happen in a session?
So what happens in a session one-to-one with a practitioner, we actually will have you tell your story, but what we're doing is we're watching, where do the eyes go? Where is the brain actually accessing this information? What happens in the neurology? So you might come in and say, you know what, Liz, I'm so mad at so-and-so and I just can't get past it. We have a chat about it and you chat on. I'm really not listening so much to the words, but watching the nervous system. And all of a sudden, maybe you'll start talking about your dog, and here it comes. Here comes the, the color in the skin, maybe the anger or the sadness or the tears, and that's my in. Even though it's not what you said you came for, it'll be related in the nervous system, and the nervous system will show us the spot that you can get in. And that's it. So we'll work through whatever that is. But what's funny, what it looks like is an excavation of the biggest emotions of your life, but in 10-second increments. It'll come up, and it's from 10 to 30 seconds that'll last. Anger, fear, pain, these horrific stories in your life. And they come in waves and then they collapse. So to me, it's very stream of consciousness. To you, it'll sound like a very linear outlaying of your life. But in doing this, because we're constantly providing input and stimulation to let the nervous system see itself, when you leave, you would say, why am I here again? Or I would say, so you came because you're so mad at so-and-so, and you would say, oh no, Liz, that was never a problem for me. Once it's gone, really, once the feeling is gone from the body, the mind just doesn't give a crap about it. Yeah. We call it a neurological amnesia, but it's the truth. These things that were the biggest problems in our lives are relegated to a book on the shelf over there, some story about me, but I'm not there anymore. I'm a different human. After a session, you actually are a different human. You're wired differently. Your hormones are different. Your chemicals are different. Your electricity is different. So a session changes you physiologically, not just mentally. In fact, I would say the mental change is a side effect.
So this sounds like magic. Is it a one session, and then people might come back for other issues, but generally they can remove something in one session?
Yeah, it really depends on the thing. So if you're coming for a really fresh concussion, that you need multiple sessions to keep up with the healing of the brain. But if you're coming for a big emotional issue, a lot of times it's one and that one's collapsed. It's done. And then sometime later, your system will actually regrow around this new idea. So up to 6 months later, your body's still changing. But something else will come up under it, the next thing. And the nervous system is so smart. Once it learns you can do this, it'll say, hey, what about this thing? This thing is taking a lot of our energy. How about we clear that out? And the thing is once your voltage is raised, once you actually get back the horsepower running an old pattern, what your body does with that energy is massive. It will start to allow you to heal. Bodies in fight or flight don't heal. So once you're out of that, the body will start to naturally heal. So weird physical ailments start to go away. People sleep differently. Their hormones change. This is why I say it's such a physiological change that happens. So by the time you come back for the next one, you're a different human. You're at a different consciousness level, and the body's really ready to work and change. So a lot of people do this for themselves. We have a program called The Essentials, and people can do it for themselves. And some people will take on a challenge every day. Other people will do 5 minutes a day just for brain health, but even 5 minutes a day after 7 days, you're a different person. So it really creates massive change, from biting your fingernails to saving marriages and even healing major medical crisis.
So do you have practitioners all over the world?
We do. We have practitioners, well, not on every continent. We have practitioners in Australia and in the UK and all over the United States. Yeah.
Wow. How many practitioners do you have?
We have a few hundred, but in terms of people who are actively really practicing and available to be hired, about 45. It's a quite intensive training. There's a lot to it. So what happens is a lot of our people are doctors and therapists. So they add it to their practice.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Or they're a physical therapist or a craniosacral therapist. So you may not see them as just a cognomovement practitioner. So that's what happens with a lot of people who study our work, is adding it to other medical practices.
So it sounds like a really painless and a quick and complete fix in the nicest possible way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the design from my perspective. I'm a person who's impatient. I didn't like going to seminars where I had a seminar high or reading a book that I was so hopeful was going to change my life. So excited, only to realize that it's an idea that didn't change me enough to stick. And then I would find I would be depressed because I thought, oh, everybody else probably can do this and not me. When I realized, oh, this is just a pattern my body's running, it's learned, and it learned wrong, and I can change it. Woohoo! Now we're on to something.
Yeah.
So it's not just about quick change. It's not a state change. It's a physiological change. A state change is, you're fighting with each other. Somebody does something silly and you start laughing. That's a state change. This changes the way your body functions around a subject. So once that happens, you literally have taken the next step up. It's not 3 steps back now. You've taken the next step up, and you've built a foundation for yourself where you can clear more and more and more and maintain what you got rid of before. So it was very, very important to me in building and developing this.
Liz, we're pretty much out of time now, but this is fascinating, and I'd certainly like to know more about it, and I'm sure our viewers would. So I think you've got plenty of information at the website cognomovement.com, yes?
We do, and right now we have a free class. If you just go to the homepage, cognomovement.com, it says it's for Gaia viewers, but you guys can watch it too. It's, if you want to go directly, it's cognomovement.com/Gaia, GAIA, love. And it shows you how to instantly put yourself in that 500 love or above state. It is just a state change, but you can use it to change reality, change your mind about something, change your mind about how you feel about someone, manifest. It's an amazing, amazing class.
Liz Larson, thank you for all of that wonderful information, and thank you for sharing your 10 best list of spiritual books with the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations.
Oh, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun. What a great conversation.
Yeah, I agree. That's it for this week. I'll be back at the same time next week with another 10 best interview for the No BS Spiritual Book Club. Till then, it's goodbye from me. Thank you again to Liz Larson, and don't forget, check out cognomovement.com.
Thank you.